So we'll be doing May June 2022 paper 2-2 now, and we'll be doing the pseudocode questions first. So I'm skipping the theoretical questions. Okay, let's start from here. They're saying that state the error in each case or write no error if the statement contains no error. You can assume that none of the variables referenced are of an incorrect type. So we have status true and false. Okay, so true is a Boolean value, false is also a Boolean value, and when we try to AND them together, so it should just simply give us false because AND is only true when both values or all values are true, so there is no error here. Okay, then if length of password is less than quotation marks 10. Okay, so quotation mark is not a string, it's an integer, so you are essentially trying to compare an integer with a string, so there would be an error, and the answer would be that 10 must be converted to integer. Then we have L case of electrical. So okay, in order to see the error here, we need to go to the insert document, and if we go to an insert document here, and if we look at L case, okay, so this is a bit older paper, so I don't think we have here. Okay, so back then it was called L case, but in the latest insert it is called to lower, and then we have to upper. So they're not separate functions anymore, but the answer would have been that L case only works on character values, but electrical is a string. And then we have isnum minus 27.3, and we know what isnum does. Whatever value you pass it in, it tells whether it's a valid numeric value or not. With decimals or without decimal, either could be the case. So minus 27.3 is actually, it's going to return false because we are not using the quotation marks here. We are sending an actual real value here, whereas in the isDum function you're supposed to pass in a string, right? It says it must either be a string or a character. So the answer would be minus 27.3 is not a valid string or character. So we get 4 marks for this. Then in the next part we have the flowchart. I'm skipping this for now. Then we have the structure chart, also skipping this for now, we'll do it towards the end. Okay, then we have question number 4. So question number 4 is actually a very interesting question. The procedure last line will take the name of a text file as a parameter. Okay, so we are doing May June 22 paper 2-2. This will be question number 4, I believe. Yes. Output the last 3 lines from that file in the same order as they appear. Use the variable line x, line y, line z to store the 3 lines from the file. You may assume that the file exists and contains at least 3 lines. Write the pseudocode for procedure last lines. Okay, so procedure last lines, and we are supposed to send in a parameter of the file name, so let's call it fname, and this should be of type string. Since this is not a function, so no return values, and then we have end procedure here like this. Okay, now we do the actual part. So if I open the marking scheme for this to show an alternative approach, in question 4 they have used this approach where they're reading the file till the end of file, and then every time they read one line, the current line, and then we have 3 variables, line x, y, and z. So in line x, in the first line we copy the value of the second line into the first line, and then the value of third line into the second line, and the current line becomes the line z. And then we keep on repeating this. So every time what we're doing is, let's assume we have a file here. That would be a much better idea. So let's assume we have some file here, and maybe we have some random strings. So we have fire, water, air, earth, love, something like this. So we will initially read this line, and this would be read as this line. Okay, this will go actually as line z, and then this would be line y, and then this would be line x. So next time what will happen is that this line z would go one step down, so this becomes line z, then this becomes line Y, and then this becomes line X. And we keep on doing this until we reach the end of the file. Or you can use the opposite names. You can use X, Y, Z approach here. So X would be the first, Y would be the second, and Z would be last. So this is one way of doing it, but it's a bit counterintuitive, or maybe a bit tricky to attempt in the paper. So I'll just give a simple logic here instead of this. So it's up to you, whatever you want to use. It's highly unlikely the question would be repeated, but some aspect of this question could be reused in another question. So my logic would be a bit different. What I'll do is that instead of using this substitution method, what I'll do is I'll go all the way till the end of file. So maybe this is the total number of the total number of lines in the file. So I'll go all the way till the end, and then I'll keep a count. So in this case, the count would be 5 lines, right? And then what I'll do is I'll loop from 1 till count -3. Essentially, in our case, it would be 5 minus 3 would be 2. So then I would loop from line 1 to line 2, and then I would use the read file, which would actually update the pointer every time. So what read file does is that read file reads the current line and then automatically goes to next line in next iteration of the loop. So once I have ran the loop 2 times, so my read file operator would exactly be here at this point on the air element on line number 3. And then since it is at this point, I can simply just print out the last 3 values by using the read file thrice. So this would be a much simpler method. I just need to bring the pointer here somehow, and that is what we have to do. We'll just count how many lines there are, and we subtract 3 from there, and from that point onwards we'll get the 3 lines that we need. Okay, so let's try this. We will declare the value at the end. Okay, so in order to do this question, we will essentially leave some space for declaration here. This would be the declaration towards the end. Okay, first of all, we have to open the file, open file fname for read, and then we always have to close the file, whatever the name of the file is. In fact, let's just call it f for now for our convenience. And then we have to count all the number of lines, right? So we had 5 lines here. So in order to do that, we have to loop till the end of file. While not end of file of our current file f will end while here, and every time we have to read the line, so we have to use read file, then f, and then let's read it into a variable. Let's call it line maybe, and then we increment the line count by 1. So let's say, or let's call it data, and then let's call it lines is equal to lines plus 1, and then lines would be initially set to 0. Okay, so once this loop ends, we would be standing at, or the pointer would be at the last line in the file. So once the loop ends here, this is where the pointer would be at. It would be at the last line here. Right, now we need the last 3 lines. So what we need to do is we need to subtract 3 from here, from the current counter. So it goes -1, then -2, and then -3. And then since the pointer would be at the third last line, from that onward we can just read the file and store the data in all these 3 variables, and we can just print them one by one. So in order to do that, now I have to run a simple for loop. So for I 1 2. Okay, so the line count, whatever the line count was, we have to subtract 3 to get 3 lines before that. So we'll do from 1 till lines -3. So if the value of the total lines was 5, so 5 minus 3 would be 2. So that means we would run the loop twice. We would read 2 lines. And if it was 10, then 10 minus 3 would become 7. So from 1 to 7, we would read from 1 to 10 lines, we would read the first 7 lines till this point, and from 7, 8, and then 8, 9, 10 would be our required lines that we need. So I'll just change it to lines -3, and then read file again, f comma data, and then I do next line. Okay, once I have written this loop, now it is guaranteed that the read file would have sent my pointer to the right number of line. So in this case, let's say if we have 5 lines, so it would be pointing at the third line. So because read file will have again, since pseudocode is not going to execute, we're just assuming that the pointer would be here, but this is how it is logically supposed to work. Now since it's at the right starting line, we just need to read the file thrice, and then we just need to store the values in line x, y, and z. So I'll just write read file f comma line x. So this would get me the first line, and then we just repeat it thrice. This would be line y, and then this would be line z. So if I go back, since we are at this, so this would go into line x, then this would go into line y, and lava will go into line z, like this. And then going back up, we just need to output the last 3 lines. So we have closed the file, and then even before closing the file, we can just output the data. So I'll just output line x, line y, line z. And that's it. That's the whole program. Again, an easier way of doing what was done in the marking scheme, or there could be multiple implementations, totally up to you what you want to do. Okay, I think we have to declare these as well. Yes, use the local variables. So we have to declare now. So declare line x, line y, line z. So I made line lowercase here, it should all be uppercases. So please keep that in mind, case sensitivity. And then declare line as an integer. And we also use data here. And also whatever the loop variable we use, that must also be declared. So we cannot leave it undeclared, otherwise you will lose 1 mark. So declare I as an integer also gets you 1 mark. And with this, the whole question is done. This was a 6-mark question. So this would be the right pseudocode to make it work. Okay, now next part is part B. The algorithm in part A is to be amended, and then the calling program will pass the number of lines now. Okay, and then they are saying that the line numbers can vary from 1 to 30. It can be assumed that the file contains at least the number of lines passed. Outline 3 changes that would be needed. We'll pass the number of lines to output as well as the name of the text file. Okay, so for this, we first of all need the user to include the file name, and we also need the user to send in the line number, the ending line number. Okay, so this would be the first thing. So we'll write modify the procedure header to cater to a new parameter of integer type for total number of lines, and a string parameter for file name, like this. Then the second part would be, so they're saying that the calling line will pass a number of lines. Since we are not going to store 3 lines anymore, it could be 5 lines, it could be 10 lines, so we cannot just make variables on the go, like 10 variables on the go. So the best course of action would be to store every line in an array, and then process that array, output that array, modify that array, or whatever we want to do that. So we can write that we will introduce or add an array in the logic that will store each line instead of storing them in line x, line y, and line z. So these variables would become irrelevant. And then they're saying it can be assumed that the file contains at least the number of lines passed, and then the file of numbers could vary from 1 to 30. Okay, and yeah, that's it. So then once we have the values in the array, so actually let's simulate this in an example for the array. So let's say for I 1 to 30, and we say contents, current index, and we take this from the current line that we have read. And the line would be read like this: read file f comma line, and we'll put line here, and we'll do next try. So what this will do is it would read the first line fire, and it would go and save it at index 1 of contents. So the first index here would become fire, like this. Then we'll read the file again. For second iteration, it says water, so it will store water at the second index, then air, then earth, then lava, and this will keep on happening for another 30 times. And with this, since you have all the values in the array now, you can just use any number of lines to get them. So if I ask you to print last 5 values, so what you can do here is now you can just run a new loop for x from, let's say, 30 minus 5 to 30, which is essentially 25. And then you just print out these values, output contents index x, like this. So that is how you can do that. You can just output all the contents of every line inside the loop then. So that would be the right answer. So the last value would be to output the contents of each line stored in the array inside a loop, like this. Okay, in the next part we have pseudocode traceable, so we'll do it at the end. Okay, now the next pseudocode writing question. A string represents a series of whole numbers which are separated by commas. Okay, so the comma is used as a separator. The string contains only the characters from 0 to 9 and a comma character. Okay, we have to write a procedure parse that will take the string as a parameter, extract each number in turn, calculate the total value and average value of all the numbers, and output the total and average value with a suitable message. Okay, so this is essentially the pseudocode version of the function split that we use in Python. And what it does is it simply converts your string into an array. So we have to literally implement that in pseudocode. You're given a string of numbers and they have not told you that the numbers would be your fixed size, right? They nowhere in the question it says so that the numbers would always be 2-digit. You can see here there's a 3-digit number. We can assume it could be of any length because it's not told us. So we cannot go for the fixed pattern that we just read the values and at every third index there would be a comma. So we cannot go for this assumption. Instead we'll have to use a while loop, and every time we'll encounter a comma we'll have to assume that this is the value, there is a value before it, so we'll read it and then we'll get the value out, and then we can just total these values one by one until we have summed all the values, and then we get the average out. So that would be the logic of this program. Okay, now in order to solve this question number 6, let's come with the logic. So the problem here is that we'll have numbers separated by commas. So what we can do here is we'll use the string handling here, and what we can do is that we'll start with an empty string. Let's call it value, and value would be initially empty. And then until we get a comma, we'll keep on appending each character, or we'll keep on joining each character into this value string. So first we read 1, so it's not a comma, so value becomes equal to 1. This would all be string. And then we read 2, so value becomes 1, 2. And then since we have received a comma, that means that this is a complete value now. So what we do is that we'll add value into total, and this must be done in integer form. And we keep on repeating this, so loop until the length of the string, whatever it is, let's call it series. So loop until the length of the series or until the length of the string. And we keep on doing this every time. And every time we add the value into the total, we have to set the value back to empty for the next number. So now the comma has been read, so now we move to 1 again for 13. So this becomes, value becomes equal to 1, then value becomes equal to 13, and then we add this into the total. So total now becomes 12 plus 13 would become 25. Then I eventually, since we saw a comma, so value becomes equal to empty again. And let's do it for one more time. So value then reads comma, and after that we have 4, 5, 1, so it reads 4. Then we'll join 5 into that, then it becomes 4, 5, 1. And then after that, since there is a comma, so we'll add it into the total. So the new total would become 451 plus 25, whatever the value is. And this will keep on repeating until the end of string. Now the one thing that is very important that you have to keep in mind, which is a very kind of like a natural mistake to make is that if we look at the last character, after the last character there is no comma, and once we have read the last character, since the length of the string has been reached, so this character would have been read, but it wouldn't have been added into the total, because we're only adding to the total when we actually end up finding a comma like this, when the current character becomes equal to comma. So once the loop ends, then we have to do this thing again for the last digit, but we'll have to do it manually for the last digit because it wouldn't have catered in the loop. And that is the only catch here in this logic. So let's try to do this now. This is question number 6. Okay, I'll just get rid of this. Okay, we are doing question number 6 now. Okay, for question number 6, now we have to write the procedure parse. So I'll do that. We have the procedure parse, and we're sending in a series as a string. You can call it anything you want. And then this would be the end procedure function, procedure, not function. Okay, so again, we'll leave some space for declaration. We'll do it at the end. The total should initially be set to 0, or let's call it sum. It should be initially set to 0, and then we'll have some sort of a counter as well, because we need to find the average of the values too. So count should be set to 0 as well. So count is set to 0 like this. Then we agreed that we'll have this string called value. So this will also be set to 0 initially. It should be set to empty. Okay, then we run a loop for I 1 to length of series. So let's say this is the series that we have 12, 13, 4, and maybe 12, 13, and maybe let's keep it 200 for convenience. Okay, so the length is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, the length is 9. So this loop will run 9 times. Every time we have to extract one character, and for this we have to use the substring function. In the substring function, this would be the mid function. In O level it's called substring. So in the mid function we pass in the string, then we tell the starting index, and then we tell it how many characters do we need from this index or from this character. So if we have this string and starting from second character, which is B, I need 3 characters, so it would return me BCD. And this is the fixed format, and again this insert document is given to you in the paper. So in order to get the character out, I'll use the mid function. So mid of the series starting from index I, go to get me 1 character at a time. So this will extract 1 character at a time. Why? Because this I is set to this value is set to I, so it would be 1, then 2, then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc. So every time, so this would be character 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7, and every time we're getting 1 character at a time, so it would be 1, then 2, then comma, then 1, then 3, then comma, then 2, then 100, 0, and 0, and 0. In fact, I'll just keep it like this to signify that these are all separate characters. Okay, we get 1 character at a time. So here then we check if the character is not equal to a comma, or a better option would be to assign it into a constant. So constant, let's call it comma, and let's assign it the value of a comma, so we can just use it as a constant. So if character is not equal to comma, then what we'll do is, since 1 is not equal to comma and 2 is not equal to comma, that means we'll keep on joining them in our value string. So it would be initially empty, then it becomes 1, then it becomes 1, 3. So I'll keep on concatenating, and for concatenation we use the ampersand operator. So it would be value is equal to value ampersand character. So initially value would be 1. Initially, since it was empty, then it becomes 1, and then the second character would be 2, so it becomes 1, 2, and then we get a comma. Okay, so when we get the comma, what we have to do is we'll have an else statement, and when we get a comma, we have to add this into the current total. So we say total is equal to total plus value, and before we add it into the total, we must convert this into an integer. So it becomes num string to num. Again, this is a function given in the insert document that you must know. So string to num will convert whatever string you have inside that. There should be a valid integer or a real number, and then that is converted into a number form. So we get the number out, we add that into the total, and we increment the count by 1 because we have found a number. And then since we have gotten a number now and we found a comma, so now we have to restart the parsing process. So we have to set value to empty again. Okay, if we don't set the value to empty again, what will happen is that after adding 1 to here, it will literally just add 1 here and then 3 here. And it will keep on attaching all the characters at a time, and then the whole total will go wrong. So we are not supposed to do that. We will reset it. So next time it's again empty, and after comma maybe this could be 96. So next time after the comma I read 9, so I get 9, I join this, and then I get 6 and I get 6, and then it forms 96. So I convert this into a number, I add this into the total, I increment the count, and then I reset it to empty again, and this goes away. Then again we have 2, then we have a 0, then we have a 0, so it becomes 200, and then we again add it into the total, and then we make it disappear by making it empty again. So that is the basic idea, and we do end if, and yep, that's it. So this would have added all the values up till the last comma. Okay, now what is the issue with this approach? As we discussed, let's say you have 207, so we had 1 comma, it would have added 12, then we had its second comma, it would have added 96 and 12, and then after that, since there was no comma here, and we are saying that we are only totaling whenever there is a comma, since there is a no comma after 207, this value wouldn't be added in the total. So we have to do it manually now. We need to extract the value out, and we need to simply just add it into the total. And when this loop would have ended, yes, when the loop would have ended, so if character is not equal to comma, so 2 is not equal to comma, 0 is not equal to comma, and 7 is not equal to comma. So in the value we would have already gotten 207. It's just that it wouldn't have added into the total because there was no comma after that, the string ended. So after the loop, what we'll do is we'll simply add this value into the current total. That's it. We'll just say, I think we called it sum. Okay, we've been using total. Okay, it's fine. So total is equal to total plus value. Again, we have to use string to num, and we add it into we convert this value into that, and then we add it into the total. Again, why? Because till this point they were added into the total. 207 was not added into the total because there was no comma after it, and we are only adding it when we see a comma. So we add this into the total, and we do count is equal to count plus 1 because we read another number, and that is it. And now the question says that you have to calculate the average and output it with a suitable message. So average is equal to total divided by count, and then we'll output sum of values comma total, and then output average of values comma average, or you can call it sum of series and average of series. And now we have to make the declarations. So declare sum and count would be integers, then average must be, since it's been used, so it must be declared, it must be real. Since for loop variable was used, I, it would be an integer. Then declare value as a string, and character was also used, so declare character as a char. And I think that's pretty much it. Yes. So with this, when the loop ends, when the procedure ends, we would have successfully added all the values separated by commas in this question. And this is a 7-mark question. Right? So with this, we're done with question 6 as well. So we were doing May June 2022, paper 2-2, and we were on question number 7. So we had done the parse one. Okay. So in this question, they're saying that in the programming language, we have string functions that are equivalent to the ones in the insert. document, so we have a left and a right function, but it does not have a mid function. Okay, write pseudocode for an algorithm to implement your own version of the mid function, which will operate in the same way as that shown in the insert document. Okay, so we'll open the insert document, and here we know that the mid function that we get is working like this. It will take a string, it will take the starting number, and then it will ask you how many characters do you need from that starting number. So if you need B, C, and D, so we are passing in A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and then we're starting from 2, which is this B here, and then we're saying 3 characters, so it means B, C, and D. So the question says that you have to implement this on your own now without using the mid function. Let's say if it is not the case, so we have to use left and right functions to implement this. Okay, how do we go about doing it? So it's not that difficult. So what we have to do is, let's say if you know the starting position and you know you need 3 characters, so what you can do is you can extract the left part of it first, like this, and then you can get rid of A from here, or you can extract the right part of it and then you can just discard the remaining characters after that. So it's totally up to you. There are multiple ways of doing it. So let's try to attempt this. This would be question number 7. So question 7. Okay, here we go. Alright, for question 7, we are supposed to write the function, and we'll call it function mid as stated in the question. So function mid, and then it will be end function here, and then we have the returns. It will return some sort of a string. Okay, now there's supposed to be 3 parameters here. Just like in the insert document, we have the string, we have the starting in position, and then we have the number of characters. So we have the source string, which would be a string. Then we have the start, which would be an integer, and then we have the number of characters, or the count of characters would also be an integer, like this, right? So we have to implement this on our own. We are assuming that this is not given to us. Okay. So first of all, whatever the length of the string that we given, source string, we have to extract that. Okay, so let's try to actually run this. So let's say if I call mid on the source string, let's call it maybe laptop, or maybe some gaming laptop or something. And then we pass in maybe, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, let's change, maybe let's use a game, so the Last of Us, and then maybe we just want to return last year. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then starting from 5th character we need the 4 characters. Okay, so starting from the 5th character we need 4 characters, and let's return this in, let's call it substring or something. And then whatever the output is, we have to output the value of sub. Okay, so starting from the 5th character, I need 4 characters. So what do I do essentially in this case if I can only use left and right? So we can start from the right part, or we can start from the left part, and we can say, first let's calculate the length of the string, which is the source string. So let's call it ln is length of the source string. So in our case, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So it would be 14. Okay, so let's get some part of it. Let's call it sub, and in sub we will use some sort of a left function that will start from the length of the string. Okay, now what does left do? So in left, it gets us from this string, it will get us this many characters, right? Okay, so this should be not length, this should be source string. Okay, now what do we do here? So in this part, what we're going to do is we will have the number here, which is the count of characters, and then we also have the starting integer, right? So if I want to get last out of here, basically I need to just get rid of the whole part after the word last. So how can we do that? We need to use last. we need to use left. Okay, so how many characters do we get from the left side? So it would be, so you've given the starting position, which is 5, and you've given +4, which means till the 9th character, so that would be, so 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, so not 9. Okay, so if I do 5 plus 4, this would be, so again if we count them, if we make them, so this is again 1 2 3 4 spaces are counted, 5 6 7 8, so 5 plus 4 would give us 9. So we just essentially subtract 1 from them, and then we can get the exact number of characters like this. So it would get us the last. So the of us part would be cut, it would be cropped. So at least we get some part of it, right? So what I'll do here is, or let's create a new variable. Let's call it remaining. Remaining would be the length that we have right now, and we have the start and we have the count. Okay, so let's do start is an integer, then start plus count, and then we subtract 1 from it, I guess. So again, when we're passing in 5 and we have 4 here, so the total is 9, and from the left side we're saying that get us 8 characters from the left side. So when we get 8, so again it would be 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, and let's try this. So from the left side I just need the remaining, let's call it remaining left. So we call it remaining left. Okay, so when we do this, this is what we'll have, the last, right? Okay, now this is still not enough. We also need to get rid of this the, right? Okay, now where is the starting from? So this is 1 1, so this will be 1 2 3 4, and this is the 5th character that we have, right? So the starting value was 5, and before that this is all the extra stuff that we do not need. So we just need to get rid of it, and for that now we have to use the right function. So we can just get the number of characters from the right side that we need. So now the value is 5, and so we already got the last, and we need to use the right function in order to eliminate this starting number of word. Okay, so in order to get the last, these amount of characters, we already have the count, which is given us to as 4. So we can say that the substring would be now right, and apply substring, apply right function on the substring for the count number of characters, because count's value is set to 4 here, so we need the 4 characters on the right side, and this would literally get us last from the right side. These are the last 4 characters, and then we will return the value of sub. So it works for this example. Maybe let's try another one. So yes, it's working on the comp sci example as well. Let's say I want to extract comp here. So what did we do? We get the length, we add the start and count values, which would be 5, then we subtract 1 from it, it becomes 4. Then we extract 4 characters from the left side, so from comp side we are left with comp, and then from the right side we extract the count number of characters, which in our case was 4. So from the right side this would also be 4 characters, so comp is successfully extracted as well. So question 7 is done now. Again, there could be multiple implementations of this, so this is just my way of doing it. I think it's done differently in the marking scheme, so you can follow whatever logic you want to, or you can make your own logic as long as it is correct and it follows the criteria, so you'll be awarded full marks. Okay, so the values passed to your mid function needs to be validated. Okay, so assume the values are of the correct type. State 2 checks that will be applied, that you can to the values passed to the function. Okay, so right now we are not, so they're saying the length is, okay, it's of the correct data type, right? So we should check that the number of characters that we want to extract should be at least equal to 1, because if the user enters -5, -30, 0, that is wrong. And then the length that we want for the source string should be enough. It shouldn't have 0 characters or 1 characters even, because 1 will always get you 1 character. It should have at least 2 characters. So source must have at least 2 characters, and the value of count must be greater than 0. So these two would be the right validation checks. Okay, now we move on to question 8, which is the last question of the paper, and it also is kind of difficult. So let's see how we'll do this. A program allows the user to save passwords used to log into websites. A stored password is then inserted automatically when the user logs in. Okay, it's like your typical password manager that we have here, like in all the browsers. Okay, then the global 2D array secret of type string stores the passwords together with the website domain name where they are used. Secret contains 1000 elements organized as 500 rows and 2 columns. Okay, so we should visualize it, but it is already done for us. So when you'll open any specific row, column 1, you'll have the name of the website, and then the specific rows, column 2, will have some sort of an encrypted password. For another row, column 1 will have the website name, and for column 2 it will have the password, again encrypted. Unused elements contain the empty string. Okay, this is very important. So any unused elements would be ignored. They may occur anywhere in the array, so it means that the data is not sorted. Okay, for security, the passwords are stored in an encrypted form shown as this in the example. The passwords cannot be used without being decrypted. You assume that the encrypted form of password will not be an empty string. Okay, so this is also important. The programmer has started to define the program modules. So there will be an exist function which will take 2 parameters, a string, a character, performs a case sensitive search for the character in the string, returns true if the character occurs in the string, otherwise false. Okay, this is going to be a simple linear search. So let's label it linear search. Okay, then encrypt will take in a password as a parameter and returns the encrypted form of the password, and then takes an encrypted password and returns the decrypted form of the password. Okay, so encrypt would simply convert. So if I have a password, let's say mobile, so encrypt will convert this into some sort of unreadable value like this, and then if I decrypt this password, so it will get me back the original plain text, which will be mobile in this case. Okay, in a case sensitive operation, A is not same as the A. Okay, so a good idea would be to actually compare the cases, or we can just convert them into the same case of lower or upper. Okay, write the pseudocode for the module exists. Okay, so exists has to be used, and we simply have to just check if the character is existing in the string or not. It will return true, otherwise it will return false. So this is very simple. It's pretty much a generic question. What we have to do is we have to apply a linear search. We are given a string, and then we're supposed to look for that character in the string, and it is a case sensitive search. So we are not going to convert anything to upper or lowercase. We'll leave them as they are. Okay, so function exists, then we have a string and a character as a parameter. So let's call it source as a string and then target as a character, and then it will return boolean and function, because we have to return either true or false. Okay, all right, next thing, so we'll assume that there's a string. Okay, let's actually run some dummy data. So on exist function, let's call it response, and on exist, let's say I'm passing in maybe some data, maybe let's call it confidential, and I'm looking for I in confidential. Okay, so we'll go through all the characters one by one. We'll break down the string into character by character, and then we'll compare is this I, and all the way till the end. As soon as we find the I we're looking for, we'll return the value of true. If I'm looking for, let's say, Z, so since it's not part of Z, so I'll look all the way till the end. So there would be two ending conditions, either, so we'll repeat until either the character is found, which means found is equal to true, or we can just write found, or the index would end, or you say index becomes greater than the length of the string, which would be whatever we store it right now using the length function. So len would be length of source string. Right, so these would be the two terminating conditions. Either we end up finding the value that we're looking for. So if you're looking for I, we end up finding I somewhere in between, or if the value does not exist, let's say we're looking for z, so the index would eventually go above the length of the string. So if the length is, let's say, 10, so since we do not have z at this point, all the characters are done, so the length of the value of index would become 11, and that means that the value does not exist. So bringing back the words, let's rewrite this, or in fact let's keep it like this just for convenience. Okay, so we get the length of the string. We should do it only once, no need to do it inside the loop, and we need to set the index to 1. You can set it to 0 as well. Okay, we need to use the mid function now. How do we extract one character at a time? We use the mid function, and we just write one character at a time, and every time the index changes, so character is equal to mid, the source string would be passed, then the loop variable, and then 1. It means that we're extracting one character from each index or the position. So when I is 1, that means one character from one position. Then when I is 2, then one character from second position. I is 3, one character from third position. I is 4, fourth character from one character from the fourth position, so on and so forth. So we get one character at a time. Okay, and then we check if the character that we're looking for is equal to the target character then. So the question says if you end up finding the value, then you return true. Okay, so since we find the value, we simply return true. That's it, and we end if. Right? And let's say, in fact, we do not even need found in this case because we have the function available to us, so we can just use the return keyword. No need to use found here. So if at any point character becomes equal to target, let's say we find I, so it will instantly return true, and then the whole function terminates, and then we go back to line 18. Right? So we don't need the separate boolean. Okay. If that is not the case, let's say the repeat loop has run completely and then still it never returned true, because if it had returned true, then the function would have terminated. So since that would never happen in some case, so we'll simply return false outside the loop. And then we also need to increment the value of index by 1. Index is equal to index plus 1. Okay, what will happen now? Let's see. So we're looking for, let's say, n now. Okay, so I is 1, so we check, is c equal to n? No. So index plus 1, so we go next time. Is index is 2 greater than the length, which is 10 maybe, so 2 is not greater than 10. Okay, next character we get is o. Is o greater than n? No. We go to next character, which is n. Okay, is n equal to n? Yes, it will return true, and from line 12 we'll instantly go to line number 23, like this, and then the function would end and it would return true. Let's say I'm looking for, let's say we make a smaller word, maybe let's use FIFA here, and I'm looking for n in FIFA. So we start, f is not equal to n, next index, I is not equal to n, next index, f is not equal to n, next index, a is not equal to n, next index, and when at index 4 it becomes 5, since 5 is greater than the length, which is basically 4. So since it becomes 5, the loop ends and we simply return false, which means that the character does not exist in your string. That's it. So this is the whole answer. We don't need to call it because they've not asked us that in the program. So we are getting one character at a time. If we match, return true, otherwise we return false at the end. Okay, this is done now. So moving on to the next part. In fact, we can even simplify this. We don't even need a repeat until I use the repeat because we were using the found variable boolean. So we can just literally now run 1 to len for loop, and then we simply just write next I, right? Because we're just counting the values. We're not using any conditional loop anymore, and this becomes even simpler. So if at any point it becomes equal to target, return true, and this idx also goes away. Here we go, even simpler. Okay, now on to the next part, which is part B. Okay, part B is going to be a bit tough. So they're saying we have to write a module called search duplicates, which will search the first password that occurs more than once in the array and output a message each time a duplicate is found. Okay, so what you have to do is you have the 2D array like this. It has multiple rows and multiple columns. You will be looking for the password here, and then if it duplicates, then you will keep a track of that password and you'll keep on saying that this password appeared here as well. So let's say if at row 27 we again have the password this website.com, so it will be printed again as a duplicate. So search for the first password that occurs more than once in an array. Okay, so we know for sure that this has to be done using a nested loop. Otherwise, there is no way of comparing current password with all the next passwords. Okay, for example, if the same password was used for 3 websites, this website, website 27 and website 7 and 10, the following message will be output. Password for this is also this and password this is also this. Okay, so password of this website was used on this, and then the source website password was also used on this other website. And once all messages have been output, the module will output a message if no duplicates are found. Okay, write efficient pseudocode for the module. Functions have been written. Okay, encrypt and decrypt have been written for you, so we're not going to write them. And it is necessary to decrypt each password before checking its value, which makes sense because it will be stored in an encrypted manner. Okay, now what we have to do is we simply have to pick one value and we have to compare it against all the other values. So we should actually first visualize this problem. Let's look at this example. We have websites here and then we have the passwords here which are decrypted. Okay, so technically they'll all be asterisks or they would be encrypted, but for now we're assuming that decrypt function has been applied. So the question says that the first password that occurs more than once in the array. Okay, so we have to use a nested loop. So first we'll start with this web. Let's say we maybe let's make it tree and let's make it intranet. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll pick the first value, the first password, decrypt it, and then we'll compare it with all the other values. So let's pick intranet and we'll not compare it with itself, we'll compare it with index row 2 column 2. So tree, then plant, then internet, then tree. So it's not matching with any of these. Okay, so we go and we pick row 2 now, and again we'll start from the current column, which is 2, and then we'll compare it with the values ahead of it. So we have plant, we have internet, and then we have tree. Okay, finally we found a match. Tree and tree matches. This means that web and it web both have the same password and we have to output that, right? And that is what the question says. We will have to output that, and then towards the end, if there are no duplicates, then we will simply output that there were no duplicates found. Okay, so in the first part of the question, let's actually create a new array and just store all the decrypted passwords there like I've done here. Okay, but we can't do it directly, so let's try for part B. This is called search duplicates. So this is going to be a procedure, search duplicates, and this would be an end procedure. Okay, what we have to do here is that we have to first decrypt all the passwords, and we know that the passwords are stored in the second column of the array, and this array would have how many values? I believe it has 500 rows and 2 columns. Okay, so it will go all the way till 500 rows, right? So we don't need to look at that many values. This is just a set of dummy values. So let's first decrypt the passwords. Decrypt all passwords. Okay, and we'll store them in a separate array. Let's call it passwords or password, whatever. So first we'll declare that array as well. So we don't really have to make another array, but this would kind of help in simplifying the logic. If you want to do it in the same loop, you can do it, or you can do it in 2 different loops. So we'll decrypt all the passwords. So for I1 to 500, and since we know that the passwords are stored in the second column, we are not going to use a nested loop here. So the name of the array is, what is the name of the array? It's called secret. Okay, so we check, or let's get the current value. So the current value would be secret current row in column 2. So let's make it R for row, and we check if the value of current is not equal to the empty string, then that means there is some value here and we can decrypt it, and then we can store it in the password array. So password index r will apply the decrypt function, which is decrypt like this, and will simply pass in the current value here, which is some password here, which is right now encrypted with something like these circles. Okay, so if that is not the case, if there is already some empty value stored there, we can just leave it. We don't have to do anything. And then we do next star. Okay, so now we have the passwords decrypted. Now we can go into that array and we can start the sorting. So now we'll compare the passwords. Okay, so we have 500 rows. So we have to use a nested loop here. So for row 1 to 500. Okay, so we'll do it till 499. I'll explain why. And let's get the current password out, which would be pwd row r, and we check if the current is no. So we have to add the empty string in the array regardless as well. I forgot that password would be simply empty string value like this. Okay, so if the current password is basically not an empty string, that means there is going to be some valid password here, which means the value is used. Okay, so now we have to make a comparison of the current value with all the next values in the array. Okay, so let's remove this. Let's make this maybe random, and maybe let's make this blunt. Okay, so what will happen is if we start from the first value in column 2 and we compare it with all the values, since there was no comparison done, it means that internet does not exist. When we go to row 2, now we do not need to compare it with the previous row, because we had already compared the current column value with all the next rows. So when we go to row 2, we do not need to compare it with the values before, because it is guaranteed that there was no match. So we just compared the values ahead. So random does not exist here. Then we go to plant. Again, we do not need to look at the values previously. Okay, the issue here would be if you compare it with the values previous to it, it will also end up comparing it against itself. And when it will compare it against itself, it will always give the value to be duplicate. Okay, so we'll not do that. We'll just compare values ahead. So plant does not exist here, but it exists here. So itweb and whoweb have duplicates now. So that is why what we'll be doing, we'll always be looking one value ahead of the current index. So our outer loop would run for 499 amount of times, right? And then the inner loop would run for row plus 1 to 500 times. Okay, now what does this mean? So if the value of r is 1, so this would start the loop from 2. So if we are looking at internet, it would compare it with all the other values ahead of it. If the value of r is 3, so if the value of r is 3, if we are third row, then it will start from 4 and go till 500, which means it will compare plant with internet and plant and all the values ahead of it. It will never start from the first index. Again, I've explained the reason. If you start from the first, it will eventually end up duplicating itself 100%, which will mess up the whole logic. So that is why we are going from 1 to 499, because if at this point we go till 500, so 500 plus 5 plus 1 would make it 501, which would render it wrong. So we compared the values with all the values ahead of it, and here we're going to look for some sort of a comparison. So if the value so if the current password that we're looking for matches anywhere with the password that we have in the inner loop. Okay, again, this is the one that we have picked, right? So if the r is set to 2, this is the password we have picked, random, and then we're comparing it with all the values ahead of it. So this is the current password that we are, and then the value in the inner loop, the passwords in the inner loop, these are the ones we are comparing them against. So this is the current password, and this is all the comparisons that we're making. Okay, so if it matches, then we'll simply say output. So what was the output? That the password for this website also used for this website. Okay, so password for ampersand secret current row column 1. Okay, so again, if we are looking for the password, let's say plant, and plant has been duplicated, so we just need to access the value in the column 1 for the current row, which is whoweb, and then column 1 for the current row, which is itweb. So that is what I've done. Current row column 1, and I'll say ampersand also used for, then ampersand secret inner loop column 1 for j. So it will tell us. So again, this is for the loop variable r. This is the one that we are comparing it. So this is the chosen one right now, and then these are the ones against which whom we're doing some sort of comparisons. So this is represented by the loop variable r, this is represented by j, and j would constantly change until the whole loop is done 500 times, and then the value of r would change, and then j would repeat, just like how nested loops work. So password used for the current value against the value that we're comparing it for. And since we also found the value to be duplicated, we'll set a found variable to true, because they're saying you also have to output if no variables were duplicated, and then we just close all of this and next bar like this. So once the whole nested loop ends, we will simply check if the value remained false. If not found, or if found is equal to false, then we'll simply output no duplicates, no password duplicates, and we do endif, and then we also have to set found to false initially, and we have to do all the declarations as well. So if we go back to the question here says that only the first password that has been duplicated. Okay, so in this case it will go through the whole 2D array even if there are multiple duplicates, but the question specifically mentioned that it has to be efficient pseudocode. So what we have to do is we simply have to stop searching as soon as we find a duplicate value, and the best way to do that would be to just simply use a while loop or any repeat until. So maybe we can use a repeat until here, repeat until found becomes equal to true, or we can simply write until found, or the value of our inner loop variable which was set to, okay, the outer loop variable which was set to r, until r becomes greater than 500. Okay, in our case it would be 499, because we were running it from 1 to 499, so it should be becomes greater than equal to 499. Okay, and then we need to set the value of r to 1 initially, and then found should be set to false initially, and now it should work efficiently. So what happens now? As soon as we end up finding a value that is duplicated, we set the found to true, and then the loop will end. Either that would be the case, or we'll simply go to the next row, and we keep on going to the next row until row becomes greater than or equal to 499. So when it becomes 499, we do all of the processing, and then it becomes at 488 it will do all the comparison, and for 499 it will end. In fact, it should be greater than 499. So it does the processing for 499 as well as we were doing in the for loop, and then it will increment it by 1, and then it becomes more than 499, so the loop ends. And then when we make the condition that if the value will, if the found was not set to true, so we'll simply say no password duplicates were found. So this was one step. Okay, and if you don't want to do this extra method, so you can just literally copy it here and you can paste it somewhere here like this. So we will simply decrypt the current password that we have, and we can just get it from the secret array. So this would be secret current row password 2, and we'll apply the decrypt function on it, and then we can do the remaining stuff, and this will keep on happening, and then we can get rid of it just to make it even more simple. That's it. This is the whole part. Okay, so going back, we are done with this. This was an 8-mark question. And then, okay, so there's another pseudocode part. All right, this is a bit lengthy vaporizing. Okay, they're saying, okay, do not use pseudocode. All right, so in part C, The question says that there is going to be a password for fixed format consisting 3 or 4 groups, okay, separated by a hyphen, okay, must be 14 characters long, be organized as 3 groups, then not include any duplicated characters except for hyphen. Algorithm is generate password, exists will check if a certain character exists, and then random character will generate a single random character from within this. Okay, describe the algorithm for generate password. Okay, so how do we do that? So in order to generate a password, what we have to do, we have to make 3 groups of 4 alphanumeric characters, which means that we'll start from an empty string and we'll keep on adding 1 character at a time whenever they'll be generated from a random character using this function. And then this would be done multiple times in order to generate that. So they're saying there must be 14 characters. So we'll have one loop for 14 characters, and then we'll have 3 loops, one for group 1, one for group 2, and one for group 3. So let's write this down. So what we'll do is we'll have declare and initialize an empty string that will store each character, each random character, and return the complete password at the end. Okay, then like we discussed, so there's supposed to be 14 characters, so there would be validation. So conditional loop to validate 14 characters in length, and then there should be, okay, yes, this is done. Then we have to use random character to generate the characters. So call random jar to generate a random character inside the loop. And then you can also mention that we would need 3 loops. So we'll have implement 3 loops, not 3 in fact. Okay, so this would be 1 loop for this, one. Okay, we can just write 3 loops. Implement 3 loops to generate 3 sets of 4 characters, which would be separated by hyphen, and then we are just going to, and in the last part they're saying that they must not duplicate. And then finally in the last part we have separated by hyphens in our password string, and yeah, I think that should get us, okay, this is 6 marks. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, this would get us 6 marks. Alright, so in the pseudocode what we're supposed to do is we'll have some sort of a loop here. So there would be, so we'll have some empty string, let's call it password, like this, and then we'll have a loop that will say while the length of the password is not equal to 12, I believe 12 or 14, okay, if not equal to 14. So as long as that is not the case, what we'll do is we'll generate a random character using the function random character.
Can't we just use a for loop for this?
You can use a for loop. Okay, no, because it might be the case that, so it will generate a single character. Okay, yes, because we are guaranteed that it will generate a single character, so yes, you can use that. So we'll call the random character here, it will get you a character, and then you're supposed to concatenate it into the password. So password is equal to password ampersand character, something like this. And then before we actually do that, we also have to check that if it already exists, and for that we implemented the exist function, right? So first we have to check if the in the exist function, if the string is password and the character already exists in it. What is exist to? We already wrote it, so it will take a string as a parameter and then a character to see if it exists in it or not. So here we're going to check if the password that we have right now and the characters that we generated, is it already a part of it? If it is, then we are going to simply reject it. And so if it is, yes, so if it returns, let's say, false, that means that the value does not exist. Only then we will concatenate it into the password like this. And then simply, once we have it, so we'll get the 4 characters here, and then we'll start concatenating them into our string. So that's the whole idea for this question. Okay, we don't need to.
But how will we make 3 groups of 4?
Okay, for that we'll need a nested loop here as well. So to make 3 groups of 4 characters, you are getting 1 character at a time and you're concatenating it every time, right? So you'll have some sort of a for loop here. So for I from 1 to 3, and every time you're getting the random character here and you are concatenating it, and once the loop ends, so you will add your password ampersand with a hyphen like this, and this will keep on repeating, and every time you will be adding some characters in there. So it will generate 4 characters. So the whole thing actually needs to go inside a loop again. So this would be, we have to generate 4 characters. So yes, for let's say J1, 2, there are 3 groups here. So this whole thing goes inside a loop, and then there are 4 characters here. So this goes inside another loop, something like this. Okay, just making it on the go.